Hello and welcome to our webinar series, What's New at AmericanAncestors.org. My name is Ginevra Morse, Director of Education and Online Programs at American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society. I will be moderating today's event. We are a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history and are pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. Our presenter today is Don LeClair. Don works on our database collections and is responsible for the search experience on AmericanAncestors.org. He has 30 years of experience in the software industry, working in and leading engineering and product management teams. Don is a longtime member of NEHGS and enjoys tracing his ancestors through New England and New York. So this is the second session in our new webinar series. Every 3 months, we'll provide a new installment that reviews the most recent additions and changes to our award-winning website, AmericanAncestors.org. After a brief introduction, our presenter will highlight our newest databases and additions to our digital collections. Then we'll discuss a few projects that are in progress and wrap up with questions from our listeners. Throughout the presentation, we'll also share a few enhancements to the search experience on our website. At any point during the presentation, feel free to type your question in the panel to the right of your screen. We'll address those after the presentation. There is no handout for this session, but we are recording this event. And starting tomorrow, you can easily go back and review any of the content from the presentation on our website. So if you missed something on today's first listen, don't worry, you can always go back, review the presentation later. All right, so without further ado, I will turn things over to Don.
Thank you, Ginevra, and thanks everybody for joining the webinar today. So as we said, the focus will be what's new on AmericanAncestors.org, and within that, we're going to really look at two aspects of the online presence of American ancestors. The first will be database and the database-related collections, which we've highlighted here under the search menu. And then the second part we'll talk about is what's been happening in our digital collections, which you can primarily find underneath the library heading. So the goal here is to really help you understand what's new so you're getting the most out of your membership. So starting off on the database on the search side, so if you look under the search menu, you will see that we have a few sections to this. So one of those is the search all databases, which is advanced search is the other term for it. And then we have here in this section here a variety of category searches. So you want to just search within a specific category, you can go there. And then last but not least is the browse databases A to Z. So this is an opportunity to look at what we have online and look for what resources you might have that you'd like to search. So in terms of the databases we have, as of this morning, there's 465 databases. This pie chart gives you a perspective of that by the category or the type of the database. So you see the large green band here, which is the most prevalent, is our vital records type databases. So these are databases that are primarily focused on birth, marriage, and death type information. Second is census, including tax and voter lists. Then comes genealogies and biographies. And then the other two I think are worth mentioning are the court, land, and probate. We won't be talking about probate today, but we have, for example, for most of the counties in Massachusetts, the original file papers extending from the beginning of the county up to the mid to late 1800s. So it's a unique resource. And last, but by no means least, journals and periodicals, which we'll talk about some more, is that we have a wonderful collection of genealogical journals online. And in these databases, we have a 1.4 billion or slightly over that in terms of searchable names. So people tend to think of us as related to being a New England orientation, and certainly we do have a lot of records from the New England states, but as shown in this chart, the pie chart, you can see we essentially do have records in the database from just about every state in the United States. And then in the word cloud up here on the left, you have an idea of the countries that we have. So it's not even just the United States. We have records from Canada, England, and a variety of countries around the world. So it's good to not think of what you're looking at here as being things that are solely oriented towards New England. If you have ancestors in other parts of the country, you should consider searching American Ancestors for those as well. So the focus of this session is not a how-to-do search, but I do want to just point out a couple of resources that are available for you if you're if you're relatively new to American Ancestors or would like to find out more about how to get the most out of the search experience. You can look underneath the Learn menu. And here you can see, for example, underneath the Learn menu, there is a subject guide on using AmericanAncestors.org right there. So that's one that gives you a nice reference in terms of how to use a variety of the capabilities that are on the database search side of experience. And here you see that you see that guide on how to use American Ancestors. You can read this like a manual, read it from top to bottom, but there's also links that you can see in the middle of the page on specific topics. So for example, if you were interested in how do I save a search or use wildcards within names, those things are all available. You can drill right into those and get more information. So I think it's a great resource, especially if you haven't spent a lot of time on American Ancestors. You can understand some of the nuances and how to do search on that site. In addition, we have a webinar recorded a little ways back on searching databases at AmericanAncestors.org. So this is a full webinar, approximately an hour, to go and go through the search experience and provide a lot of tips and techniques on how to do that search. So you can find that as well under the Learn menu. If you look at the archived webinars, and you can browse through there or arrange by date. This one was in December of 2017. But it's also available as a direct link from most of the search pages. So if you look on all the search pages, if you look, there's a help section, and one of the links underneath help is watch a video tutorial on search, and that will take you to the same place. So a couple of useful references. So the other part of things we're going to talk about a little later today is the digital books and manuscripts. So under that library menu, you can see here digital book and manuscripts collections. So you could click on that link, and that will then take you down into the home page for our digital collections. So that then is the home, if you will, for these collections. Tend to be really associated with what is actually in the library in terms of manuscripts and other materials that we have available. And it's really looked at as two related and separate pieces. First is on the left-hand side, you have the Jewish Heritage Center. On the right-hand side is the library and the R. Stanton Avery special collections. So you can, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But it's good to understand that in this area, which I think a lot of people haven't taken advantage of, there's over 750,000 pages of additional information in these digital collections, and they are searched separately from databases. So as we get into that, what's new in these areas a little further down, just to make sure that's clear, when you do database search, you're searching the databases. If you want to look what's in digital collections, you need to come into the digital collection side of American Ancestors. So with that background, let's move forward and take a look at what's new on the database side. And we're going to be covering the period from October 1st through the end of December. Excuse me, pardon me. If we click forward at one slide, we provide updates through our blog, which is called dbnews.americanancestors.org. So if you're interested in knowing what's new on the database side, as soon as it comes out, then you can subscribe via email to the updates on this blog. If you are interested in browsing that at some particular interval that's convenient to you, then you can also just go to the DB News blog and then browse through whenever the last time you looked at it. You can see what's been released. And the blog entries are all separated by date, and you have a thumbnail definition of what came out on each individual date, along with a link to a more detailed description of what we have produced. So what we're showing here on the screen are some of the entries that came out just immediately before Christmas. So if we go back, I mentioned the browse databases A to Z. This is a very useful facility to look at what databases we have. You can also do searches against those. And it just so happens to be one of the areas where we've added a feature to the search experience. So if you click on that, the layout of this page has changed a little bit. And what is new and different is with the big red arrow is the enhancement is that we will now narrow this list of databases as you type. So if you start typing in a word, in this case, I have typed the word Roman as in Roman Catholic. And as I type those characters, the list of 465 databases has been winnowed down to the 5 that have the word Roman as in Roman Catholic. And what we're searching is not just the title of the database name. We'll also look at what the contents are of the database description, locations, other kinds of things. So it's a very useful tool when you're trying to find out what resources we have. And we think that this change to have it search as you type will make it even more convenient and useful for you as you go through that. And then before we click on the first example there, in case you haven't seen it before, we have a list of each of the databases that meet your criteria, and there's 3 icons there. One says I want to go do a search on this database. The second indicator just tells you whether that database has images or it's an index-only database. And then there's a star next to that, so you can set favorites or unset favorites as well. So if there's certain databases you want to be able to search regularly, you can make them one of your favorites and go that way. But the first record on this, the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston, also happens to be where our first announcement is for updates on databases. So on this one, this project has been going on for some time. It is the largest project we have of unique work where we're going out and imaging and indexing all of the sacramental records of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston. So we release things as they come out, and in the last 3 months we've released 11 new parishes and 57 new volumes for those parishes. So this project was actually extended. In our last quarterly update, we announced that we were now extending this to go take the period including 1900 through 1920, where previously it had been stopped at 1920. So this will continue for the next couple of years before we get caught up to all the records the Archdiocese has for us to digitize. So in terms of status so far, we have 547 volumes complete, and we have over now 7 million searchable names. And these pages comprise, the pages in those volumes add up to something in the ballpark of 131,000 individual pages of information. So if you get to when you get to the search page for these databases, and as I go through the new databases, I will at least touch briefly on the database-specific search page. You have a set of fields that are tuned to what you can search in this specific database, because not every one of our databases have the same set of values available or indexed. In the case of the Archdiocese of Boston, we have it very richly indexed, meaning we have both the person's name, the years and type of record. So this would be births, baptism, marriages, deaths, ordinations, any sacramental type record. You can type in the location where it occurred, and you can also limit your search by volume and page. And 2 interesting things specific to this database is you can also search for confirmation names in the confirmation records. And we've extended the use of the family member section to include witnesses. So with the Archdiocese, we have indexed the witnesses which appear on baptism and marriage records. So if you happen to know of someone who was a witness at a marriage or baptism, you can put their name into that family member field, and then when you press search, they'll be included. And in this case, what you're seeing is the search parameters itself. It's always useful when you're on this database search page to page down and see the additional information that we provide. So here you're seeing is we then have under search tips information about what fields are indexed and who can go into those. We have in most databases sample images in terms of to give you a perspective on what kind of records are in there, and you can click on the image and have it blown up. And then we have an additional textual description about what's in that database, where did it come from, and what's covered, other background information, and further down there, citations. So I won't repeat this, but it's good to know when you're looking at a database, you have the opportunity to get more information about that particular database just by paging down beneath the search screen. So just as an example, one other interesting thing about the Archdiocese databases is that many of the records, not all of them, but many of the records are actually recorded in Latin or have Latinized names. And certainly when I'm searching for my ancestors, it probably wouldn't occur to me to search for Dionysium instead of Denis. So when we go through the indexing process, we have made an effort to anglicize the names, especially those first names, and provide an alternative spelling, which would be much more likely to be what you would find if you were researching your family. So it's something to be aware of that you'll see in a not something that we see in most of our databases. Normally things have been recorded in English and we're just displaying them. In this case, we have to do some translation. And there's also some parishes that have other languages such as French and Polish, and we do the same technique in those. And then if you were to click down and view the image for any one of these records, then you would actually see that the handwritten record, in this case we're seeing the records of St. James Church in Salem, and it's a marriage record, and you can actually see that the text was recorded in Latin with the names for Dennis Kelly right there on the top, along with spouse and other information. So that is a example of what we've done in that project, and we will have in our regular updates, we'll be able to give you more news as what comes as we go forward. The next thing I want to talk about is probably our second largest project that we have going, another major undertaking, which is to extract from the New England Historic Genealogical Society register vital records. So there's a little bit of background. It's good to understand that we publish all 175 volumes of the register since its initial publication in 1845 are available all online. It has about 60,000 articles in it so far, and they're all indexed pretty much just by first and last name. So that can make it hard to find a specific person, because that, especially with common names, will appear in multiple volumes. And so what we've done is we've been building or re-indexing this other database called the Vital Records from the Register. And this one is now focused on making sure that we get all of the birth, marriage, death, residence, military service, church records, all of those other things that are embedded in those articles with the appropriate dates and make them searchable. So it's a wonderfully valuable project, because it's a lot of scholarly work has been done over these 175 years, and this will really help unlock the value of that. So if you look at the search page for the Vital Records side of the register, then you have searches that similar to what we have for the Catholic records. You have first and last name, years, record types, and you can pick volumes and family members. So we're focusing to do a really high quality job of capturing all of the relevant information for these records. And then if you do a search, and to help highlight the example or the benefits that we have, I've done a search for Samuel Smith. If any of you happen to have ancestry with last names of things like Smith and Jones, you know it can be challenging to find them because there's so many records. And you see here in the Vital Records, we have a birth record. We have the location of birth. So he was born in 1641 in Dedham, Massachusetts. And you have the ability to now drill down and see that record. If you look at the way that just the register is indexed when it's in the journal database, which we can show on the next slide, then really what you have is the information about Samuel Smith, or Samuel Smiths, of which there are 486 records of them. But the only information we have is a date and a record type of record. It's because when we index a journal, which is what we do with the register, the record date is the date that article was published, or the date that volume of the journal was released. So yes, you can find all of those people, all of the names can be found, but it may take a lot more review before you find the records you're specifically looking for. Whereas we go through the Vital Records, then you have them tied out with specific events in specific places, which will speed up the research time for you to find things that are valuable in the register. So the next area of update is one of our research projects, our ongoing research study project, Western Massachusetts Families in 1790. And this one is, as I said, it's an ongoing project, and basically it's tied to the original 1790 U.S. Census, and what we're doing is building out what we call sketches or short stories of the families of those people that appeared in 1790, providing much more information about who the other family members were, where they lived, where they came from, that sort of thing. So in that research study project, we have added 6 new families, and the way these sketches are organized is you have the name of the head of household in 1790, and then in parentheses you have the name of the town they lived in. So you have Joseph Badger from Blandford, Massachusetts, and so on through the other set. So as these sketches are produced, we make them part of the database, and then periodically we do roll them out in a book form. And so the image we see on the right-hand side is the volume 4 of the Western Massachusetts Families in 1790. There's an interesting case here where a lot of these things will appear online first, and then when we get to the point where there's enough for another volume, then they'll get published in hard copy. You'll have another option for seeing that information. Now, in this particular case, those sketches, given that they're pretty focused in terms of when the people lived and the years and locations they lived in, it's a pretty straightforward indexing. It's indexed by first name and last name. You already really know you're from Western Massachusetts is where you're searching. You can limit your search situation to a specific volume if you'd like. You also have on the top hand right side of the page one that I didn't mention before, but if you haven't seen it, it's good to be aware of, is that if you just want to go and read a sketch, up in the right hand corner you can browse this database. You can, underneath the pull down, you could pick an individual volume and go directly to that volume or to that sketch and read that. And one other interesting thing about this particular project is that this is open, meaning that if you have done family research on people that have lived in Massachusetts that appeared in this census of 1790, you might be interested in submitting your sketch and having it published as part of this project. And so we actually have a page on American Ancestors about ongoing study projects, and if you would like to submit this to have it included, then you have the information here to go off and possibly participate in producing content for this database as well. And Helen Ullman is the editor, and she would be who you would end up working with to get your sketch submitted for inclusion in this database. So now look at another study project, Early New England Families. This one is really based on providing more information from the Tories' New England Marriages prior to 1700, which is a remarkably famous reference work in the colonial days. And Alicia Crane Williams is slowly going through and producing sketches of families. In this case, the information from the sketch is organized by the person's name as well as what year they were married. So it's the last study project we were tied back to the census. This one's tied back to the New England marriages. So it's how the examples are, for example, here, Alexander Adams, who came to Massachusetts, and you have information about him and his marriage. And then you have Joan Kemper Coffin, who came with her family, including her son Tristram. They settled in the Haverhill area, and then later on, Tristram Coffin went down to Nantucket, and may or may not be related to the Coffin House. I didn't get a chance to check that, but certainly it's a famous name in Nantucket Island in Massachusetts. And the searching for this database is, given that it's somewhat more wide-ranging over New England, we have a higher level of indexing. You have the first and last name, years, record types, because it's not just the marriages, of course. You have sketches based on the entire family, and you also have relationship names such as mother, father, and spouse that are available to you. And then if you look in the search results, one nice thing that we can provide for this specific database is that there's a link to download the PDF. So each sketch is several, 1 to 4 or 5 pages long, it depends. But you can not only read that online, you also have the link in the search results to actually download the PDF. One change that we've done last year that might provide some additional flexibility for you is we now have, when you're looking at a record detail page or on a page images, we have a print page range, and you now have a capability for any database to be able to print out a range of pages. So for example, if you were looking at a study article or a journal article, you could say print this page in the next 4, and then I believe pretty much everybody's browser has an option to print those pages to a PDF. So if you do a print page range and check the destination of PDF, then you can produce a PDF of any pages for American Ancestors that you'd like. So this feature has been a nice thing to have on the New England Family Study Project, but now you actually have the ability to produce PDFs from any of our databases whenever it's convenient for you. So the next set of updates I've grouped into one slide, and those are genealogical journals. So I mentioned them earlier, and really American Ancestors is the only site that has a significant collection of scholarly journals on genealogy that are indexed and available online. So of course we have our own, we have the Register of American Ancestors magazine, but we have a variety of other partners that work with us to produce genealogical journals. So in this last quarter, we announced the Mayflower Quarterly. This was actually a brand new journal. We did not have it before. And as part of an agreement we have with the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, we have achieved the rights to index and produce volumes 1 through 50s that covers the years 1935 to 1984 and put all of that online. So those all came out all at one shot in December. So that's a new resource. Then we have, for most of these other publications that you see here, we have generally a 5-year delay between when they produce the journal and we can put it online, because these organizations sell the journal as well as selling reprints. So in the last quarter, we added volume 86 of the American Genealogist, we did volume 34 of the Essex Genealogist, and volume 40 of Rhode Island Roots. And I guess I hadn't been commenting on it, but we have indicated on these slides whether these are available to the individual level above NEH members or to what we call the guest members or free membership. So we tried to make sure on all these slides we're documenting that. So in the other journal that we released is volume 36 of the main genealogist, and that particular one is available free to all NEHGS members. So if you're a guest member, you have access to the main genealogist, and you can see that without having to pay for a membership. And the other thing that we did in this last quarter is actually do a little bit of adjustment to the category of journals itself, in that we used to have in the journal category databases that really were vital records that were extracted from journals of various sorts. But unlike a journal, which we talked about briefly before, where the record types are all record, we had some of the databases that had birth, marriage, and death and other things. So we recategorized the ones that have vital record type information into the vital record category. So now the genealogical journals are very consistently indexed, and the way you search is pretty much the same for every individual one. And before I give you an example, just to follow up on the brief comment I had about guest memberships, is one of the questions people ask is, well, I'm a guest member and I'm not doing a paying membership, what databases can I list or can I see? And then we have the link on this page shows you the list of databases that are available to you as a guest member. So I talked about the main genealogist, but we also have things like the probate file papers I mentioned earlier are all available, and there's about 40 some odd databases that are available to guest members at no charge. All you have to do is sign up with your email address and by clicking that sign up for a free account button right there in the middle of the page. So for what I want to show for this, given that we have an update to a number of the different databases, we do the category search. So back when we showed the search menu, we have searches by category. So this is the category search page for journals and periodicals. It works the same way as database search does, except we'll search all the items in that group or that category at once. A couple of things to be aware of in this is that I mentioned it before, but people do get confused, is that when we index the journals, what we've done is essentially convert the annual index that's usually available in that journal into essentially an every name index. So if the name is mentioned in an article or on a page, then we have that name, but we don't have date information. So the dates that are applied to these records are the date that that article was published, or the date that journal, or the year of that journal. So it's an important thing. We try to put that as bold and to highlight that. So unless you happen to know a specific year range, or you would like to say, gee, you publish all these new journals and they'll cover the years 2013, 2014, I can restrict the range to see what's new. Probably you won't want to start off by searching by years. And then the keywords when we're doing our journals and periodicals are article titles. So wherever possible, we have captured the article titles so that when you do check your search results, you're able to see not only the person's name, but maybe what the title of the article was they were referenced in. And two other things I just wanted to mention on the screen is up on the top right is see all databases in this category. So you can click on that blue button if you want to see, when we say search the category, what am I actually searching? And that'll give you the list, which I'll show you in a minute. And then you also have the opportunity to switch to advanced search. So we have advanced search, which searches all databases. So if you want to toggle conveniently between a category search or database search and advanced search, we have that button there. We'll just switch back and forth between the two. So this is the list. I talked about our cleaning up, or if you will, refining the contents of the journal category. So these are the list of the 20 journals that we have indexed and available online in that journal category. And you can see there are quite a variety of them, and we have updates to these pretty much. They tend to happen late in the calendar year, but not in every case. So it ties to pretty much when publication started for that particular journal, and then as a new year becomes available, we'll get that indexed and put online. And so here's an example of doing that search. I did a search for Henry Ford, and I put in a time range of 1935 to 50. Henry Ford died, I believe, in 1947. And if you look here, then you'll see then we have results across several different journals and periodicals. And it just so happens that the first one that comes up is the Mayflower Quarterly, which is our new database. And you can see the text, and underneath the events here will tell you that this is the article title. The article title of that was called Detroit Meeting. And so if we click through to view the image for this particular item, and if we're looking, as I said, at the Mayflower Quarterly, then we happen to see something in here about a general meeting that happened in Detroit in 1935. And in the text of the article, it makes reference that Henry Ford hosted the group and met with them when the General Society of Mayflower Descendants had that meeting in Detroit. So when you look at the Mayflower Quarterly in terms of what's in it, there tends to be quite a bit of information about who was involved in this General Society as well as each of the state societies. And then you'll have coverage of a lot of events that were happening in the GSMD. And then as you get into some of the more recent years, there are also articles about some of the history around pilgrims and their families. So I'll turn into a new database we introduced in this quarter is membership applications from the Society of Colonial Wars in Massachusetts. So this is a group that your membership is based on your being related to someone who qualifies. In this case, so you're talking about someone who was a soldier in the colonial era, serving in the military, or someone who served in government in that colonial era as well. So this society covers people who served anywhere in the colonies. So even though we're working with the applications to the Massachusetts Society, the General Society and applications themselves will span many states and people from throughout the colonies. So it's a pretty broad set of genealogies. The membership application, you have to document your descent from whoever you're applying for membership on. And so we started this partnership with the Massachusetts Society to index this, and we released the first 1,000 membership applications that they have as this fall. We were continuing to index. We will have the remaining applications extending up through 1970, as well as what they call supplemental applications, will all be indexed and available online. When we say a supplemental application, basically that is just once you join the society, you can submit additional lineages to join that society for other individuals that you're descended from. So a member could potentially have 5 or 10 or some large number of supplemental applications, and just want to make clear that we are indexing all of them. So if you look at the search form for this, it's similar to what we showed for the vital records from the register or even Catholic records. A couple of additional fields. One for if you happen to know a membership number or you're interested in joining the society, you can look up a specific member number and do a search of that application. We do also have family members. So given that you're when we say family members, you're looking at parents and spouses are recorded and indexed as part of this. You have the option of using those for search as well. So you have an example here. I searched for Walter Watkins, and I see information about his particular applications and supplements. And one of the things you have is the page numbers in these documents have a colon in the middle, and that's because we have used as part of the page number the applicant number, and then the application is typically 4 pages long. So you'd have information about what was the member number and then which page of that application are we being linked to. So you can see that in the results page. And then if you click on viewing an image, it will take to an example that is based on the actual application itself. And you see a fairly standard looking application for a lineage society in that these are organized so they go step by step from the applicant to who they're descended from. So each generation is separated and numbered. And so the nice thing about searching these kinds of items is we will index all of the people that are mentioned in the application, and then you'll be able to actually, if you're interested in leveraging that for your own research, you'll have that line of descent that you can then use for building out your own family tree. So next, a somewhat different database is the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society of Boston, or is commonly called HIAS, or at least by some of us working with it. And so this was some of the earliest records of a group that was designed to help Jewish families who were emigrating to the United States get settled. And they kept from 1904 to 1929 a variety of records really logging who was coming through the city of Boston or the port of Boston, whether they were settling here or moving on through. So there was often passenger lists available, other information about these early immigrants from Europe. So this is a database we're doing in partnership with the Weiner Family Jewish Heritage Center, which is also here part of NEHGS in total. And this is a new database that we've just just released, and we'll have some additional updates to it for additional years later this year. Now, in this case, because the records that we were processing here are typically entry records, there's not a lot of family information. So really the focus is who's the person, what year is the record, what type of record are we having. The records that are included are typically immigration records or residence records, and we also have deportation or detention type things as well. We've captured ship names, and we're in the process of getting destinations available. They should be done by next week. That'll actually be available and searchable as well. So the destination being, where was that person looking to go? So here in the example, I've just done a quick search for Boris Cooperman. And if I click through, then I can see the results. We see Boris Cooper, a single record came up. We can see that he was coming here into Boston. His final destination was Sioux City, Iowa, coming from Poland. And then we have information about that we've extracted from that record. And if I click through to the image, then you can drill down and you can see the details. So here what I've done is the page is a little small, so I've blown up the section that has Boris and then his wife and son that are there. So they were originally from Poland. He is a butcher, has a 2-year-old child or daughter who came NASA. So you have that nice information about these families, which can be really useful for as people were coming into the United States here in the early 1900s. So that concludes the updates to the database side. So what I'd like to do now is talk about what's happened in October through December in our digital collections. So the digital collections, I said before, they're really rooted in the library and manuscript side of what we have available here and making those things available digitally. So the kind of content that you'll have are genealogies, local histories, church records, Bible records, diaries, quite a variety of different kinds of things are available. So if we were to click now onto the digital book and manuscript collections, you get back to that homepage, which we talked about a few moments ago. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off and talk about what's new from the Jewish Heritage Center. So the digital collections side, in support of our Jewish Heritage Center, has some additions. And interestingly enough, that first edition is the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. So this is an excellent opportunity to talk about how we can maybe differentiate between kinds of things that end up in database and what ends up in digital collections. So the Immigrant Aid Society started in 1904. We just talked about that a moment ago. But up until 1930, we had pretty much simple list type records, the kind of things I just showed you in the database search. Starting in 1930, they started keeping case files and actually doing quite a bit more work with these families as they settled in the area. There was more information, as you might expect, in a case file. So a different kind of a record, and so we're going through and digitizing that and making that available here in the digital collection side starting in 1930. So the project, the two halves relate, but one half is captured as a database, the other half is captured in digital collections. So if you click through, if you're not a member at all, then you can actually get direct access just to go through the Jewish Heritage Center. The way you would navigate to that is you'd go from that page, navigate down to useful links, and there's a link that says how to access the Jewish Heritage Center Digital Archive, and you can go in, and as you can see, there's a comment about creating a free account. So you can just sign up, provide the information, then you'll have access to the information in the Jewish Heritage Center digital collections. So if looking at the project, so with the digital collections, then we have a summary about what those HIAS digital archives are. There's a description here, and you can either click search or you can click browse this collection, and you'll be able to go in and see the details about the information of the pages that have been digitized. So looking at this, you can see here we have several pages about different kinds of things. You can see descriptions on the pages of administration bequests. You can, if you wish, search for a name or a location and do a search against this to get to a particular case file, and then see what's in the case file. So we show an example on the next page. We're looking at an individual case file. One of the things this one happened to include in its documentation was a copy or a Polish passport. So there's someone who immigrated, and we have in Polish his passport, but we have the documentation about this individual. So during the last quarter, this is an ongoing project to bring this collection online. We added over 5,300 new pages to the HIAS database, or excuse me, the HIAS digital collection. So now if we flip over to what's happening on the regular library side, which is called the R. Stanton Avery Special Collections, or digital collections for the library side, we can click on that link to browse digital collections. And then you're presented with the opportunity to either go through sort of by genre, which is on the right-hand side, so I can pick specific things like, say, church records or account books. I also have on the left side sort of thematic groupings. So you see there church records and city directories, but you also have sections, for example, that cut across multiple genre that might have information about things like the Civil War or the French Indian Wars or that sort of thing. So either one of those navigational approaches can work. But for our example today, if I clicked on the church records, then I would get down to a definition of what is in that church records collection, which would cover multiple different documents and manuscripts. So if I do a search, I can put in Charlestown to say what kind of church records do we have for Charlestown, meaning Charlestown, Massachusetts in this case, and hit search. And then I can see, for example, here, that first page, I get a memoranda book, and I have information about the First Church of Charlestown, Massachusetts, including marriages relating to the Abbott and Stevens family. And then I can click down on the image and get more detailed information about what has become available there. And in that announcement, we have two things that are new. So we have one is that First Church in Charlestown. So the underlying book is the First Church in Charlestown. It has, for example, in this memoranda book, baptisms from 1713 to 1730, and marriages from 1714 to 1770 are in that. And then we also have records related to the First Church of Christ in Roxbury, which comes from a memoranda book of Joshua Felton, which has information in some church records from 1782 to 1803. Now, in this particular case, I've captured the manuscript numbers, so these things here, MSS 650 and MSS A205, happen to be the names of those manuscripts that you would have found also in the library catalog, which you can also use as a search term within the digital collections area. So in terms of other areas that we have updates, we have things in the areas of count books as well as genealogies, and we can probably just go forward to talk about 3 additions there. So one of these is a handwritten genealogy of the Northampton branch of the Strong and Parsons families. The author is James Delap Farnsworth. You can see it is a handwritten manuscript. That's an opening page from that manuscript. And this has information about Roger and Submit Cook, who lived in 1694 to 1714. At least their children were born then. There's information about those. We have what information, for example, the daughters got at their marriages, what kind of a dowry they got when they were married in that era, as well as records of Eliakim Cook. So it's one of those cases where the original content is a record type book, but it has genealogical information in it, and we've made that available, all of that information available through digital collections. The next one is the count book of Robert Cook. And that also then has, actually, I think I spoke correctly, this one has the information about Robert and Submit Cook included in it. So this is an account book, so you can see in the account book you have information about who is receiving money from different people, but it also has information about the family and their genealogy in it. And then the third of these is another handwritten genealogy, also by James Delap Farnsworth. And this one is the Longley family, and it's focused on the descendants of William Longley of Groton, Massachusetts. So this good examples of the kind of things that are available, early handwritten genealogies. They were never published, for example, in a book form or in a journal, but now we're making those, taking those from being in the archives of NEHGS and making them available to our members wherever you happen to be. And then the Weekly Genealogist, which if you're not aware of, it will be another resource to use as far as what's happening on AmericanAncestors.org. About once every month or so, there is a section in the Weekly Genealogist which is updates to our digital collections. And this was an update from the last quarter, which covers a number of the things we just talked about. So you can subscribe to the Weekly Genealogist and get updates in email, or you can also just go to the website for the Weekly Genealogist and browse through the postings and find things that way. So before we close, I'd like to spend just a few minutes about sort of give you a sneak peek at some programs we have that are in process. So and doing it for 2 purposes. One is so you know that there's some things that are coming that maybe you haven't heard about before, but also not many people are fully aware of the fact that almost all of the indexing work that we have for American Ancestors is done by volunteers, and we really would love to have help. This is something where if you have a few hours a week or more, you don't have to have, it's not like a full-time position. We can be very flexible, and it's something you can do from the comfort of your own home. So I'm going to talk about 2 projects today. One we actually mentioned a little bit earlier, which is the vital records from the NEHGR. And this is going to be a several years long project, but the approach of what we do is, if a volunteer, if you'd like to be involved, is you'll get an article or a few articles. In this case, we're looking at from 1861. This happens to be a register style report of the descendants of Thomas Chipman. So you would have that available, and then in a spreadsheet you would capture the events. So you'd be reading this article, you would see, for example, when Thomas Chipman or his son was born, you would capture the year or date of that person's name, and then those relationship names like father, mother, spouse. Put that into a spreadsheet, and then we bring those things together and then publish that and make a new volume or updated volume of searchable data. So it's not enormously difficult. In the case of the register, it's nice because it's printed, so it's easy to read, and you can certainly blow that up into a large size if you want to have high visual impact. It's pretty easy to work with. So that was one, and that by the way, that project is very large. That's as I said earlier, it's 60,000 articles are being reviewed to do this. So we have no shortage of opportunity for people to help us with it. So the next project here is Catholic Cemetery Association. So we have a new agreement. We haven't actually announced this one before with the Catholic Cemetery Association. This is related to the Archdiocese of Boston. And the Catholic Cemetery Association runs approximately 25 cemeteries in really within eastern Massachusetts. And we've almost finished the digitization of these records, and we're just starting now on indexing these and making them available. And the kind of information this provides is information about burials and lot sales. So it can be a great way to get information which may or may not still be visible. For example, on the burial information that's on the stone or the cemetery marker itself may or may not still be on the stone, but a lot of that information is still available in the records of the Cemetery Association. And also, given that you have a perspective on a plot and who was buried in that plot, you can often help find relationships between family members by looking at what has been recorded. And just the 2 pages here are provided as examples. They are, as you can see, handwritten. And the one on the left is from the Catholic side of the Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And the right-hand side is a book from the Holy Cross Cemetery in Malden. So these ones, you do have to be able to read handwriting to do those, but it's a straightforward process, and it's something that we really love to have help. It's your opportunity to do a random act of genealogical kindness for others and maybe find some of your own ancestors. Certainly we have a number of our volunteers have found family members when they work on these things. So if you have any interest, you can either contact Rachel Adams, who is our volunteer coordinator, and she will be happy to give you more information and get you started and give it a try. And if you have any problems finding Rachel or getting an email, you can always email me personally or email webmaster@nehgs.org. We're always happy to have more folks join our hearty group of volunteers. So that sums up what we covered today. I just wanted to recap a couple of things. So for database updates, as soon as they happen, we put them on dbnews.americanancestors.org, so you can watch that site or sign up for the newsletter. The Weekly Genealogist is a weekly update from us that has updates from all aspects of American Ancestors and NEHGS, and that is where Digital Collections posts their updates. And we also have our Vita Brevis blog. But if you have any questions on how to do things, just how to find something, we are happy to help. You can email us at webmaster@nehgs.org with questions on anything, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. And Jennifer, do we have any questions?
Thanks, Don, for your presentation. And yes, we certainly do have a number of questions. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask, go ahead and type it into the questions panel, and we'll try to get to as many as we can in the time remaining. So first of all, Christine asks, is it necessary to search each of these databases individually? Or will kind of a general or advanced search pull results from these databases? So what do you typically suggest or can offer there?
Thanks. That's an excellent question, and I'm glad you raised it because it's good to make that clear. You definitely do not have to search by the database-specific search page. You can use advanced search, which search across all databases. So from advanced search, you can search everything. So you can put in a name, a person's name, and a record type and a date range, and you can find them. In fact, even on advanced search, you can even specify a specific database if you want. So if you're just starting out, like if you found a new ancestor and you want to find more information about it, you may be best off searching using advanced search as a starting point. But if you're thinking about a particular database or you know a particular area where you're trying to find a record, then it may be helpful to use the database search. And then the other advantage of database search is that it only provides you the fields that are indexed for that database. So one of the risks with advanced search is that if you put in fields that haven't been indexed in a database, then you wouldn't get any records. So if I use an example, we talked about the Western Massachusetts families in 1790, they are indexed just pretty much, they're indexed by first and last name. So if you put in a year, if you said I wanted something between 1790 and 1800, you wouldn't get those records because they're not dated that way. So advanced search is great, and you can avoid missing too many records by starting with very few criteria and then adding them to refine your search.
All right, thank you for clarifying that. And Jeffrey asks, so how do you kind of do quality assurance for the database searches, I think kind of with the indexing? And is it possible that if I don't find something now, it might be part of a later correction? So maybe you could talk a little bit about what goes into, making sure that our indexing is as accurate as possible, and if corrections happen, what's kind of the best way to do future searches?
So the way we go about things, so when we're doing the indexing of a database, we go through a process where we have a volunteer or someone creates the index. Then we actually have people proofread all of that work, so they double check all of it. The reality is, though, problems can happen. So we talked about in Catholic records, we have 7 million searchable names. So even if we had a 99.9% accuracy rate, there would be errors that come up. So there's a couple of categories of things. If you find something where you find a record and the name was wrong or there was some error in the indexing, then please submit that to us. There's a error and correction button on all of the search pages, as well as a comment item. Either one you can use. Will get in touch with us, and we will correct those as quickly as possible. So I guess the short answer to the question is we do a fair amount of quality control. We certainly understand that not every record will be perfect, and we are happy to make updates, and we make updates every day based on member emails to correct errors in those records. So in which case, when we make those corrections, they are immediately available for search. So the next person who comes down and looks for them won't run into that problem because we will have updated the index.
And kind of a related question, Gay asks, do you update or correct Tory? So we have, Tory's New England marriages prior to 1700. That is a searchable database. And of course we have printed volume or several volumes based on his manuscript. But there have been, new findings and kind of changes since he created that in the 1960s. So how do those corrections work? Is it based on, so if you search, is it based on what people have kind of suggested for changes or in corrections, or do you kind of go in and actually change what's on the page?
So that's another good question. So our first goal is to accurately index what is on the printed or written page of the database. So we will make every effort to make sure that we have dates and names transcribed correctly. And if someone tells us, for example, on a census record or on a Catholic record that we have mistranscribed the name, we just correct those and they're updated immediately. We do not have the ability to obviously go back and edit the actual page images and put corrections on them, nor do we particularly want to go doing that. It's confusing. So even if the source material is an error, until I think last year, we didn't really have a good way to deal with that. We added a capability earlier last year, which we call annotations, which is there's some new information and it says, maybe a person's name or a date is incorrect in Tory, and someone will contact us with an authoritative source to document the corrected value, then we'll add an annotation to that record, which will appear on that record display page. So several times during the course of the presentation, I showed the record display, which has a short transcript of the record and a small page image. If we have a correction, then you would see on the record display page whatever item was incorrect is flagged in yellow with an explanation and then a link to that authoritative source for a correction. So that's something that's relatively new, but we're happy to do that when people find that there's something that's changed or something in that original source was incorrect.
Thank you. Now, Jan asks, related to the Western Massachusetts Families in 1790 study project, is there an easy way to kind of find out what sketches have been done for a given town? So can you just search by town and see what comes up? Or is there maybe another way of learning what sketches have been done for, again, a certain town?
Yeah, so I think, well, one way you can, if you browse through the volume list, so if you go onto the either record display page or on the database search page or even advanced search, if you pick that database under the volume pull down, you'll get a list of all of the sketches that are there. The sketches are in alphabetical by last name of the person, the subject of the sketch, as I recall, but the towns are all listed parenthetically. There's a fair number of sketches that may not be perfect, but you can certainly browse through and see last names of towns to see what's been referenced in that database. Alternatively, you could potentially search just putting in the town name in the search field and get the records that show up for that town.
Thank you. Now, John asks, are there plans to digitize the Western Massachusetts Roman Catholic records? So maybe this is kind of a good opportunity to talk about our relationship and our agreement with the Boston Archdiocese and how we might be able to go and work with other archdioceses.
That's an excellent question. So our agreement has been with the Archdiocese of Boston, and the Archdiocese of Boston has oversight over essentially virtually all of New England, but they are separate dioceses and they're separate structures. So actually we had the opportunity to meet with a bunch of those folks about a year ago, and we are definitely open to working with other archdioceses, but Boston is, I guess, probably best prepared for working with someone like us in that they have a full-time archivist and they have all of their materials are managed quite effectively, so we're able to go through the process of working with them. We've had discussions with other dioceses. At this point, none of them have been ready to come forward. So there was specific interest in Worcester, for example, and Fall River Diocese to work with us, but neither one of them at this point are ready to start working with us. So we're waiting, hopefully, or looking forward, hopefully, to working with more dioceses, but we don't have any to announce right at this point.
Thank you. Now, Beth asks approximately what percentage of the American Ancestors databases are available or searchable only from our website? Kind of in other words, how much overlap is there with maybe databases that we have and that other genealogical websites might include?
Yeah, so we have approximately, I should have come prepared with a number. We have approximately a little over 200 databases that are only available on American Ancestors. And then there's a number of other ones that are available. Certainly, census, for example, federal censuses are available on Ancestry and Family Search and others. And we have several databases that we provided in partnership with Family Search as an example. So, I guess the short answer is there's over 200 of the databases are currently unique to us. And I think I tried to highlight some of the key areas where we have unique databases. I think probate file papers is one. You'll see Ancestry and or Family Search will have indexes to probate records in Massachusetts, but we actually have the file papers indexed and available online. So it saves you the trouble of having to go request them from the relevant county or jurisdiction to get those. All those journals databases we talked about are unique, and there are a variety of other ones that are based on either specific partnerships we have or things that are manuscripts that are also unique to American Ancestors.
All right. Well, thank you again, Don. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions. I know we didn't get to all of them today. If you do have additional questions, of course, you can always reach out to webmaster@nehgs.org. Also, I know a few people are asking about, do we have databases for this area or maybe for this school or about a certain study project? I do highly recommend going to that Browse Databases section. And again, as Don mentioned, you can start typing in a word and then it will show you what databases kind of meet that criteria. So that's kind of another great way just to see the range of materials and locations that we cover on our website. Also, if you have more specific questions about your family history research, you may consider scheduling a consultation or hiring our research services team. And you can learn more about those services by contacting the email addresses on your screen. So thank you again for joining us today. As you leave the event, you'll have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any and all feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. And if you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs, such as the webinar that we have coming up next week on Boston Records, you can always go to our online learning center at americanancestors.org/education. I hope to see you at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.